All right, welcome back to the waiting room with Dr. SEC. We're going to go now to the Net Talk hotline. We're going to be joined by Alex Byington from the Opelika-Auburn News. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Big game this weekend, of course, when you play in the West like Auburn does and you're the defending SEC champions. I guess every game is big, but I know across the board, this one has a lot of appeal. On the Georgia side, you've got the return of Todd Gurley, possibly the best running back in the country. You've got Nick Marshall, a former Georgia Bulldog, coming back home and trying to put away the team he originally signed with. You've got Gus Malzahn, who really is coming off of his first loss of his career, where he lost to an inferior team. I mean, kind of different dynamic, how he'll be able to get their heads into the game. Is the buzz in Auburn like it is nationally for this game?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of excitement, just because of the rivalry game.
Yeah.
Georgia and Auburn, the Due South Southwest rivalry. This is the 118th meeting, if you can wrap your mind around that. So, and obviously Auburn has the one game advantage in the series just based off of the Prayer and Jordan Hare, the way the game ended last year. So, a lot of buzz. Obviously, players and fans know that the team doesn't necessarily control its own destiny, but if it does win out, it can still salvage a really good year and potentially, if other things fall their way, other teams lose or whatever, have you. Obviously, there is a lot of potential for something bigger in a few weeks. So, but right now they're just focused on trying to get back on that right track.
Absolutely. And you bring up an interesting point, one we've talked about on here, how weird this season has been already because we saw Alabama fans, not all of them couldn't bring themselves to do it, but a few of them grudgingly cheering for Auburn as they faced Ole Miss to get them back in it. And now Auburn possibly grudgingly cheering for Alabama against Mississippi State because that gets them closer to being back in it if Mississippi State then turns around and loses to Ole Miss. It's kind of been a weird year. I mean, some fans maybe having to go against their very nature and cheer for the team they hate the most.
No, for sure. I don't know if you asked a Auburn or Alabama fan, straight up, if they're cheering for the opposition, what they'd say, just given those intense rivalries. But you have to think they're definitely, for their own team, they want the best possible outcome, and knowing what wins against, like you said, Alabama this weekend against Mississippi State would do, what that would mean, and then obviously, subsequently, if Auburn were to win over Alabama in the Iron Bowl at the end of the year, what that could mean and that kind of thing. So, given the fact that Alabama already had the loss to Ole Miss and so forth. So, it's a very interesting dynamic to say the least, and one I think it kind of brings a lot of excitement just back to college football. Kind of makes this sports and this, just college football in general, very interesting, especially this year.
Absolutely. And now looking at this game against Georgia, both of these teams have a lot of similarities, something we've talked about on this show throughout the week. Both of the teams, two of the best rushing teams in the country. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, you've got probably, once again, and it's amazing, but probably for the second consecutive year, you've got the most underrated running back in the country sitting at Auburn. Last year was Trey Mason, who didn't get no Heisman talk until the very last. And then still, the fact that A.J. McCarron finished ahead of him in the Heisman vote still blows my mind. What the award supposedly is supposed to represent, but I digress from that. But this year, a lot of the same. You got Cameron Artis-Payne, a guy that doesn't break a whole lot of big runs. I think 35, 36, 37 yards, his longest run of the season. But he goes in and every single play grinds out yards and puts up big numbers. And I've got to imagine for Cameron Artis-Payne, going against Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb and Sony Michelle, he's probably got that chip on his shoulder, really wanting to prove that he's still one of the best backs in the country.
Yeah, he's not been saying that publicly. He's gotten a lot more reserved this season as he's kind of taken hold of that starter role. In the past, he was fighting for it. He was definitely more talkative about a chip on his shoulder. But I spoke a few weeks ago, talking to his dad and stuff. back from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I mean, he's always kind of had a chip on his shoulder, one reason or the other. I mean, he's always been a good athlete, but whether it was in high school where he was playing behind LaShawn McCoy at one point, or guys like that, even in Little League football, Pee Wee football, he was, seemingly always playing behind somebody just because of, who the coach was or who the family, connections were. So it's something that he's always kind of carried with him. It's obviously been a big factor to his success this year, that chip of wanting to prove himself and show that he is one of the best in the country. And so far, he's lived up to that. I mean, he's taken the starting role and really run with it, no pun intended, and really just taken over. And it's something that, he's become that workhorse that I think people thought he could be, and he's taken it to the next level. The fact that a lot of his rushing yards come in the third and fourth quarter, that second half, when he wears defenses down and was able to break a big one or break, a run to the top of the outside real quickly. Last year he kind of got pigeonholed into a kind of a short yards guy that can only run for a couple of yards up the middle and not do much else. This year he's really been able to pop it outside and kind of expand his game a little bit, show the versatility that he does have.
Absolutely. Once again, we're talking to Alex Byington, Opelika-Auburn News. All right, Alex, I've got to ask you about this passing game. At times, it looks really good. At other times, it doesn't. To me, some of it is maybe Nick Marshall, but it seems to me that this Auburn wide receiver group, they're either lights out or have a lot of drop passes. Is that just my wrong take, or have you kind of seen that as well?
No, I mean, I think that's a pretty apt assessment. I mean, there have been times this season, especially early, where, people would just make, inexplicable drops. I mean, sometimes they were right in their hands, and, the throw couldn't be more, perfect for them, whether it's over the middle or even a long pass that just kind of, the receiver just can't barely touches their fingertips. You think, oh, well, where's the extra burst that you normally show, that kind of thing. I mean, there were quite a few to Sammy Coates earlier in the year when he was dealing with a knee injury that he was trying to overcome, but still, it wasn't the same Sammy Coates we saw last year. So there were times, but I think the receiving core has really kind of, galvanized around itself and tried to, show that they are consistent playmakers, and when they need to make a play, they do. We saw last weekend when they had to drive the field, there were several plays on to Ricardo Lewis, obviously of Prayer and Jordan Hare fame from last year, and then Quan Bray made a couple big plays, including the touchdown pass in the first 5 or 6 seconds of the fourth quarter to kind of pull within one of A&M. So when they have needed to make plays, they generally do. Obviously, earlier in the games, it doesn't always work out where, if they make a play here or there, maybe they're not fighting back from 14-0 going into the fourth quarter kind of thing. So give and take, but they've stepped up when they've needed to.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point I've talked about before. Amari Cooper, to me, is far and away the best wide receiver in this league. But with that said, if I got to have a guy one catch in the fourth quarter, I'm going to go with Sammy Coates, because that guy finds a way to put on a Superman cape whenever they need him.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's been special. So I mean, it's again inconsistent at times, but really a good kid and a good player that does. It seems to be which is kind of surprising last weekend, the ending, because that's been Auburn's mantra pretty much since Gus Malzahn's gotten here. They've always been able, if it's close, if it's within a touchdown, late, they pull it out, and it's been kind of, it was almost hum ho at the end of the game, because you were like, oh well, here we go.
Yeah.
And then you have 2 fumbles in the last 2.5, 3 minutes that just so uncharacteristic, and even the players after the game that couldn't really explain how that happened.
Yeah.
They were just as shocked as anybody else. And I think that kind of goes back to speak to, what Gus has done here and what the team has kind of built around him and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond this week, given, kind of this is the first time they've really uncharacteristically buried themselves late in a situation like that.
Absolutely. And I want to we talked about that mental makeup. I want to talk about Nick Marshall just for a moment. Going back to Athens, Georgia, maybe not the storyline it would have been had they not played played last year and he played as a starting quarterback, but it is his first time going back to Georgia. And for most quarterbacks, I would say that's a big deal. I mean, when you look at last year, Zach Mettenberger going back, he played well, but I knew that or felt like that was going to play on his mind. The questions, all the things he'd have to deal with when that regards being at Georgia, being kicked off, and then going to LSU. But I almost think that that Nick Marshall almost has that Cam Newton-esque about him, that when the pressure's hotter and when the situation is more difficult and the critics are louder, he tends to play better.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a knack of his. Dennis and all the coaches have said it, and we've seen it before. I mean, not that harp on it, but that's why the two fumbles, late against A&M were so strange that they weren't all credited to him. But the fact is, he was involved in both those plays. So, but yeah, when he's needed to make the plays, when he's had to do it, and it's something. I mean, talking to his high school coach in the past, I mean, it's something that he's kind of always done. It's just his natural ability to. When you're in the fire, to respond, and he's made plays. He led them, to a state championship as a junior in Wilcox County, Georgia, and kind of, has been able to make plays when the ball is in his hands, which was, obviously a difficult aspect for him when he was moved to cornerback at Georgia, and kind of, that transition was difficult, and it's, one of the reasons that he obviously decided once he left there that he was going to go back to being a quarterback, because he fed off that. He fed off that control, that being able to lead the team and do that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, both programs are really downplaying this return of Nick Marshall to Sanford, for obvious reasons. I mean, it has been a couple of years. It's, it may be the first time he's back in the stadium that he's played them. He knows the players, he knows the team, that kind of thing involved. So it's important to him, from what everybody's been saying, it's important to him so far as he wants to get the win. And that's kind of, I mean, simplistic, but that's what he goes off of. That's what he feeds off of. And it's what led them to a, pretty successful record here at Auburn as a starting quarterback. So, I mean, until obviously he collapses on the sidelines or something like that, or the emotion catches up to him, which has not been the case at all. I mean, I tend to believe him when he says this is just another game. Obviously I'm sure it'll be extra rewarding if they come out on top and extra disappointing if they don't, but it's still a win-loss situation where he wants to come out on top.
Absolutely. Talking to Alex Byington, Opelika-Auburn News. One last question. Ellis Johnson, a defense coordinator that I believe in. I think he's a very good defensive coordinator. Outstanding job that he did at South Carolina. And at Auburn, I expected early on is kind of what lately it's not been so great. What can this Auburn defense do to turn it around against this Georgia offense that when it's on, it's probably second only to Auburn?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to take some work. I mean, there's the fact that they're complaining about, and not necessarily complaining, but, pointing to miscommunication as the big issue on defense with 3 games left in the season is kind of head-scratching, at least to me, and obviously to a couple coaches. So, they don't necessarily understand what is the disconnect there between when they're signaling plays and then what players are doing. But there's obviously been a lot of, lapses, a lot of errors in judgment in that aspect, and, just people making wrong reads, people making wrong plays, or just deciding to kind of freelance a little bit, and it costs, them. I think I did a stat yesterday or today. They've had 28 in the last 4 games. They've given up 28 plays of 20 or more yards, including 7 touchdowns. So, I mean, that kind of, when you think over 4 games, maybe that's not, I'm talking about almost 300 plays. Maybe that's not the biggest difference, but still 10% of that are big plays resulting in scores. that's not going to win you many games, and it's something that they know they have to correct, and the players are taking responsibility. And it's just a matter of them doing the right thing. I mean, that's another simplistic answer, but if they make those corrections and then make those tackles and don't mess up, don't make the wrong read, they stop them for a 5-yard gain instead of a 50 or something like that. I mean, it's the difference in a touchdown or a third down. So.
Absolutely. Alex, appreciate so much you taking some time and being with us. Can you tell our listeners where they can find the Opelika-Auburn news and where they can find you at on Twitter?
Yeah, the website's OANOW, OANOW.com, and you can find me on Twitter at AUBLOG at AUblog.
Absolutely. Once again, I want to encourage all of our listeners to go over to the website, follow them on AU Blog on Twitter. And Alex, once again, great stuff. Appreciate so much you take some time with us.
No, thanks for having me.